What's up, Mets fans? Welcome back to the True Mets Talk podcast here, talking about another series victory against a team that's over 500. So before we get into it, please, everybody, we appreciate you all being here on this lovely Sunday, this lovely Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to everyone, all the special and great moms out there. Hopefully you all enjoyed your day and enjoyed this New York Mets victory over the Chicago Cubs that we'll get into. We'll get into a little bit
Yes,
of the
sir.
series, a little bit of a series recap. And as always, we spam the W's and we welcome Zach back on to the True Mets Talk podcast. What's up, Zach?
What's up, Chris? How you doing?
Pretty good. I can't complain with the way this team is playing.
Yeah, great weather today. Another great win and just another good series overall. I mean, team's looking good, and especially against, like you mentioned, another team over 500. Something the Mets were getting clowned for, a
Yeah.
couple weeks ago with sub 30 games, and now I think they actually have the best winning percentage and the most wins against teams over 500. So it's important wins against a team that we could very well be fighting for a wild card spot with if we're in that type of scenario. So great to own a tiebreaker and get that
Again, the
series out today.
same. Yeah, absolutely. The same situation applied for when we talked about, the series versus the Diamondbacks is the same situation that plays out, in this scenario against the Chicago Cubs. Teams that are very talented will be in playoff contention, whether it's, in their division as division leaders, specifically
Yep.
in that NL Central for the Cubs, or just in the wild card. And it's great to have, first of all, stacking series wins in order to get the tiebreaker. It's going to be that much more important. And the Cubs have been playing really good baseball. So, that was the notion amongst some Mets haters in the MLB community
Mm-hmm.
that they haven't been playing any good competition. Well, the Mets are shooting that narrative down fairly quickly. And I love it. I love to see it. But before we fully get into this series, again, please smash those thumbs up buttons, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the Sunny Days Media YouTube channel as well, where you can find Zach and that whole crew
Please,
talking
thank you.
baseball, basketball, hockey, football. Also, when football season comes around, you don't want to miss that. And as always, drop those live chat comments. I know that we're going to get some people pouring in here in just a few minutes as well as this stream continues. So if you're over on X, come over to the YouTube, subscribe, drop the comments. I really want to hear what you all have to say. I'm sure we both do about this
Yeah.
series victory for the New York Mets. And let's get right into it, to be honest. I just really want to dive into this game that we saw
Oh yeah.
today. It was a matinee matchup, game 3. It was the rubber match after a pretty disappointing loss yesterday that we can talk about as well here in the next couple of slides. But, this was a game where you feel good, especially with what some of the offense produced in the first 2 games. I know that the middle game was a loss, but it seemed like a couple of guys that were struggling were really figuring it out, especially in this series. And, we'll talk about Brett Beatty here in just a second. And boy, do I owe some apologies to Brett Beatty, who had himself a hell of a series. But
That he
no,
did.
seriously, this Mets lineup, was up to the task. A huge game for Mark Vientos. This is where I'm going to kind of drop in this meme right here for Mark Vientos. And I took that personally. You all were writing me off in 2025, and I took
Yes,
that
sir.
personally for Mark Vientos said. Brandon Nimmo also with a couple RBIs, couple base knocks, multi-hit game. It was really, really good to see. And in conjunction with that, right, and hand in hand, Griffin Canning, another start for a Mets starter over the last week or so that goes 6 innings of really good competitive baseball, only allowing 1 earned run over 92 pitches, and he's able to lower his season ERA to 2.36. Where do you want to start here? Because this was just absolutely a beautiful game as the Mets improved to 26-15 on this season.
Yeah, I think there's some a lot of positives with the lineup, but I think Griffin Canning, the story that he's told so far, that everything that he's done has just it's continuing to better prove that this isn't just a flash in the pan. This isn't just a month of good starts. He's extending this into May with 2 starts now in this month, and he's looked good and he's gotten better and better. And this isn't someone that's going to overpower you. He doesn't have the best fastball, but he knows how to locate his fastball. He has some wicked off-speed stuff, the slider and the changeup, and he's able to just keep hitters off balance. Not overthrowing that fastball too much, not and mixing up his pitches and being able to pitch to his strengths instead of just trying to overpower guys, which he can't. And it just further proves that the pitching lab is working. The two best signings we've had so far this offseason in Griffin Canning and Clay Holmes. We were thought to be maybe those were guys that will find their way out of the rotation come June or July, whenever Minaya and Montas are back. And they're probably two of the top three in the rotation right now, or maybe even just the top two of the five guys there. So it's proving that, whatever Stearns is doing, whatever he's finding in these guys is working.
Absolutely, 100%. I really want to touch on Griffin Canning here as I look at the game logs, especially the types of pitches that he was throwing and how often he was throwing each of those pitches, because something was very interesting and it caught my attention in the mid-game interview that Carlos Mendoza was doing. And they were asking him, I forgot what inning he did this interview, but he's like, the question was, what was Canning doing that stood out to Carlos Mendoza in this particular outing? And Mendoza said something to the effect of, and I forgot also who the interviewer was, so I do apologize about that, but it doesn't really matter. The point is that they asked the question, what does Mendoza assess of Griffin Canning in this particular outing? He said the fastball and getting the fastball over. And I'm like, because whenever I watch Griffin Canning going all the way back to spring training, I'm like, he's been a slider predominant pitcher, which has been unusual for him in his career, especially when you compare and contrast his arsenal and the percentage of usage to last season. The Mets have made it a real big point that you are going to use your slider early and often, and then you're going to set up the fastball with the slider. So Mendoza, not even mentioning the slider, caught my attention. And so I go back into the game log on a Savant page, and I'm like, all right, 38 fastballs, four-seam fastballs for Griffin Canning in this outing compared to 32 sliders. So 6 more fastballs than sliders. You compare that with his last outing before this one against the Diamondbacks, where he only threw 17 four-seam fastballs versus 33 sliders. So I'm like, there had to be something in the game plan that they saw. Hefner saw, I'm not sure who saw it, right, in this Mets organization, but that they thought to attack and approach this Cubs lineup a little bit differently for Griffin Canning than he was attacking the Diamondbacks lineup. So I don't have the answer to that. I don't know why that is. I quite frankly don't know the ins and outs of either of those two respective teams' lineups and what the difference is versus certain types of pitches. But that really caught my eye. And that's something that, as just a regular person watching the Mets, I would never even think twice to go ahead and look at. But I was like, I heard Mendoza, and I'm like, I have to look this up. I'm very curious. So whatever it is, it's good that now Griffin Canning can utilize and work both of these pitches as his predominant pitch and still find success, as he is now just absolutely killing it so far this season. You're right. A guy that I certainly thought was going to be a long reliever for this team when he signed that major league contract, 1 year, $4.25 million. He gets the opportunity with some of the injuries, and he's not looking back. He does not want to relinquish this rotation spot, even when the reinforcements in Montas and Minaya get back. And at this point, there's a valid argument to be had of moving somebody else, right? Whether it's Tyler McGill, whoever you want to say, out of the rotation instead of Griffin Canning. But the fact that you can utilize him in both roles is a plus. And that's the great versatility of why I sort of like the signing, even though I didn't like him as a rotation starter. I like the versatility that he possessed as an arm. So I don't know if you have anything to add on to what I just said in terms of the pitch, distribution difference, but that really did catch my eye, Zach.
That is interesting to me too, because the Cubs have, they have a great lineup, and they're a lineup that's very aggressive, and they'll go and attack those pitches, and they're really good at punishing pitches that are left in the zone, as we saw with Crow Armstrong in that what was it, the top of the sixth when he hit that solo home run. It was a fastball. It wasn't an amazing spot, but it wasn't in a terrible spot. It was up and in. Could have got it in or up more, but it wasn't right over the middle. Peter Crow Armstrong really had to put a good swing on it to barrel it up and get it out of there. But that's interesting that he was throwing more fastballs against this type of lineup. And aside from that, just the consistency of Griffin Canning. I mean, how many times has he gone 6 innings so far this season? I mean, I know for a fact it's got to be close to half of his starts, if not at least half. So this is someone who has been a stabilizing force, because Kodai Senga's had starts where he's had to come out prior to the 6th, prior to the 5th even. Tyler, David Peterson, Clay Holmes, all of them have. And Griffin Canning, I'm pretty sure in all but one start has made it to at least 5 innings, or through 5 innings, I should say. So
Yes.
just to have,
Yes, all but one minus the Blue Jays in the second outing.
Yeah, yeah, and it just shows that whatever David Stearns and Jeremy Hefner found with him and told him to focus on, which was throwing the slider more than the fastball, is working, and it just goes to show that he's not going to be leaving this rotation anytime soon. He'll be here to stay come June when Montas and then eventually Minaya get back.
100%. I love it. I love it because again, I mean, I love to be proven wrong about this team and the personnel. I'm sure everybody does, right? There are
No
certain
doubt.
players in this organization that some fans will gravitate towards, and other players, it's just not the case. If you are playing for the New York Mets, I'm rooting for you to succeed no matter what, right? And no
Exactly.
matter what's said. So it's really good to see that Griffin Canning is having this success. And hopefully he's able to carry this into all of his future starts. And, he's playing for a contract. Let's be honest. He's playing for a contract. This is a guy that is in another contract year, another pitcher that's in a contract year. And the Mets have had a lot of those types of players over the past 2 seasons that have found success. And I'm sure there'll be many, many more with the way that David Stearns builds this rotation moving forward, especially in the back end. So get used to it. And it's kind of like a good philosophy because guys have something to prove, right? And then you get to decide whether you want to extend that particular player or not. Case in point, Luis Severino. I'm not sure what his overall numbers are right now, but I think he did pretty terribly today. And
Oh yeah.
a guy that, earned his money for sure, but was a little bit just beyond what the Mets' comfortable spot was in terms of a
Mm-hmm.
price point. So it's things work in mysterious ways. And I'm just really happy that David Stearns should be getting, and I know he did it in the offseason, but should be getting the benefit of the doubt. Should be getting the benefit of the doubt because of moves like Griffin Canning, 100%.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that everyone was ready to jump ship and really get on David Stearns about these signings of Griffin Canning and Clay Holmes, those and Montas too, and obviously Montas has been injured, but the two guys that probably got the most grief have been the best pitchers for two of the best pitchers for us, and someone that the Mets fans were clamoring for, and Sean Manaea, myself included, is hurt now and not doing anything for the Mets. So that's why David Stearns is where he is, and we're sitting here talking about it.
Yep. 100%, 1,000%. And just to jump over to the lineup perspective of this today, first and foremost, hopefully Luis Torrens is okay. Scary moment where he had to come out of the ball game. Forgot what inning it actually was, but he went 1 for 2 up until that point. Actually had the RBI triple from the plate, and Luis Torrens is just awesome with the bat. He's awesome defensively, so hopefully he doesn't miss too much time because Alvarez did come into the ball game. Got a base knock as well, which is good to see. But again, that tandem, as long as Mendoza has that option, either option of
Yeah.
playing Torrens and Alvarez, I think we're going to be okay behind the plate. So really scary thing right there for Torrens, but he did walk off after a while under his own power, back to the dugout, came out of the game. I don't have any updates. I didn't look for any updates. I'm sure there
Men,
are updates, but have you seen anything, Zach? Because I haven't
yeah,
seen anything.
Mendoza said he's doing much better. There was no specifics
Good.
with it, but I mean, we all know what happened. We saw where he got hit. You just kind of hope that there's no serious damage because I don't think it's something where I think once they check on him and see what's going on, it'll be fairly easy to see if this is something he's going to have to miss time for. Or it's something that he's going to be okay with after maybe a couple of days off. So hopefully we're leaning that way. I'd assume we'd probably know more if it was something serious, but time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So, offensively, I think that we can just see what transpired here with the box score alone. Lindor, Vientos, Nimmo getting the job done by and large for the most part for the Mets lineup today. And it was just basically, I looked down, right? I was busy doing, what everyone does on Mother's Day, spend time with family,
Yeah.
all that good stuff. And I looked down, I was like, home run, home run, home run in later innings. It's like, all right, it's a home run barrage. I love to see it, especially late in the game. Some clutch numbers going up over there as well in a certain situation. So it was really good to see. And the thing is that Mark Vientos, I think that we have both stated, and the same thing could go for Nemo because we've seen different
Yeah.
variations of lineups now with both Nimmo and Vientos batting in that cleanup spot. In this particular instance, it was Vientos, but the guy right behind him in the fifth spot, Nimmo, also had a tremendous game. Like, what are you
Good.
thinking with the approaches? Like, what looks different to you? I'm very curious what looks different to you, particularly about Vientos, because with Nimmo, there's a lot of approach changes, right? From a couple years ago to now, right? Especially with the on base percentage, a little bit of the walk rate, just in general, him being a lot more aggressive rather than selective at the plate. But with Mark Vientos, he came up as a hitter that we all knew had a strikeout rate that was in the 30s, right? Low 30s and well above league average. But I personally accepted that if he was going to, have power and carry over that power that we saw from him coming up through the minor league farm system. And last year he did. And this year, objectively, it was a little bit of a slow start, but it was obvious as to why is because he's expanding the zone, especially on some of the pitches that are down and away, the off-speed pitches. It's kind of like reminiscent of Pete Alonso last season, right? We had this conversation, I believe, last stream that we did. What are you noticing that's different about Mark Vientos? Because not only his confidence, to me, just looks night and day different. We're now starting to see the production numbers wise over the past week and a half start to go up. All of a sudden, the batting average that was below 200 a couple weeks ago, 230, I think a little bit above 230 now. So
Yep.
I get that batting average watching is just really basic. I
Mm-hmm.
understand that, but it's got to be a huge boost of confidence for him just to see the overall numbers going up finally.
Yeah, it's the approach and really being able to get some good wood on that ball on the inside of the plate, because that was his big dubs. That was his big that's what got him out. It was forcing weak contact out of him, and he wasn't able to really drive that ball on the inside part of the plate, and it was kind of leaving him open to pushing and fishing for pitches outside the zone or down and away, trying to make something happen. And it seemed like he was going up there with a plan. He just wasn't able to get the barrel out in front of those pitches on the inside part of the plate. So I've seen, the home run was on the inside part of the plate. The single that drove in Alonso was on the inside part of the plate. That's gonna be big because they're gonna pound him in. He's got a big swing, so that's gonna, pitchers are gonna want to attack that inside part of the plate. And as long as he can make sure to get out in front of those pitches and drive them into left field, he'll be good to go. And just the confidence coming back after the 2 days off, it didn't discourage him sitting, and he was able to come back in yesterday and today refreshed and have two nice games against the Cubs, and hopefully he can continue this into what'll be a decent series against the Pirates and then against the Yankees.
Yeah, 100%, 1,000%. As soon as this lineup gets rolling with Vientos and Nimmo, I mean, this wasn't the best series for Pete Alonso. He did get a base hit today, but he also struck out 3 times, as you can tell right there in the box score. The other games really wasn't anything to marvel at. A lot of strikeouts this series for Pete Alonso, so the offense was getting the job done without that just amazing production that we've been getting from Pete Alonso to begin this season. And it's about time somebody else, whether it's one guy or multiple guys, carries this offense outside of Pete Alonso and Francisco Lindor. And I was really happy to see that. A couple of comments that I want to get into here as we'll talk about the overall numbers from this series here, especially offensively, and talk about a little bit about the bullpen is let's address this right here. Hayden, shout out to Hayden. Salute to Hayden as well. Make sure to go subscribe to Mets Talk with Hayden on YouTube. Hey, Chris, wanted to get your opinion on Soto. I looked at the stats, and most of his stats can be padded. Can be padded numbers with runners in scoring position or runners on in high leverage spots. They are quite bad. Yeah, so I'm assuming what the question is from Hayden is that if you look at Soto's stats in general, right, they look pretty respectable, but in certain situations, especially with runners in scoring position, he has still struggled when the Mets need him to come through. And I think that's getting a little bit better, though, Hayden. I think, especially in the series, in the first couple of games, particularly that first game when he had a really huge day at the plate with the home run and a single in the later parts of the ball game. I think that that's going to change relatively soon. And we all know the number. I think it was at like 167 a couple of games ago where they put the graphic up of him hitting and what his average is with runners in scoring position. But like I always say about Soto, and at this point, you could say baby steps for this season because we've already acknowledged time and time and time again, both Zach and I, on these streams that yes, he hasn't looked like Juan Soto, right? Especially last year's Juan Soto in a Yankees uniform. For obvious reasons too, that you can kind of dwindle down to the ballpark parameters, et cetera, playing in Yankee Stadium versus City Field, whatever. But he just doesn't look comfortable, still 100% up there. And we acknowledge that. But you take a look at what he's doing over the past 2 weeks, even the past week with the OPS and batting average numbers, particularly the OPS, because I like OPS a lot more than I like batting average. If I had to pick one of those two statistics, OPS over the past 2 weeks, when we did that stream, the
1100
series
or
recap
something.
against the Diamondbacks, over 1,000. It was like just over 1,000, which is great. Over the past week, it was approaching 1,400. So I think that the situational hitting is going to get a lot better for him. But at this point, right, given the struggle, quote unquote, that he went through in the first month of the season, you want to see him just get comfortable no matter what the situation is. And then we could talk about in the 2-hole him driving more runners in. But that's the beauty of this lineup. If you continue to bat Juan Soto second, is that, yeah, you're going to want him to drive runners in because that's what he got brought in here to do. But we won't be having a lot of those discussions if Pete Alonso has been doing what he's been doing
Mm-hmm.
behind Juan Soto as well. Because I really do think that this dynamic with Soto at 2 and Pete Alonso at 3, as long as Soto's getting on base and Pete Alonso is rejuvenated, as he's proven to be so far this season, I think that we have maybe other things to worry about. So I hear what Hayden is saying with this comment right here, but I think he'll come around. I'm just happy that he's coming around in general with some of the more general metrics over the past couple of weeks.
Yeah, and the weird thing is you mentioned runners and numbers with runners in scoring position and runners on in high leverage situation. I was just looking at the FanGraph stats for high leverage situations. It says he has 2 hits all season with in high leverage situations, which I find pretty hard to believe, especially when you factor in that Diamondback series. He had the 2 home runs late in the game to tie it twice or bring it within 1 twice, and then against the Cubs in the first game of the series, that solo home run, I guess, wasn't considered super high leverage, but there's been hits there that I guess don't fall under their metrics, but there's definitely things that he's done that have kept Mets in the game and further extended leads past a point where you're like, all right, now we're feeling pretty comfortable. So I think there's things you can look at and you can probably nitpick and you could and find fault with him, but overall I think things have been good. These last 2 games not so much. That happens. The guy's been red hot so far this month. There's going to be a couple game stretch where he's going to play bad. There's going to be weeks, month stretch where he plays phenomenal baseball. And I would say wait to give to pass judgment until we get the full sample size, because it still is only a quarter of the way through the season now. So there'll be time for him to produce and come up big for us, and he will come through and come up big for us.
Yeah, 100%. I could not
I'm
have said
also
that better myself.
Yeah, I'm also curious about the runners in scoring position. How many of those situations have come up with 2 outs? Obviously, you want to see the guys come through with runners in scoring position, but you can't hit sac flies with 2 outs. You can't, ground in runs with 2 outs. So, maybe I feel like it seems like every time he does come up with runners in scoring position, it's with 2 outs. And yes, you want him to come through with those, but how league-wide stats are probably pretty low for runners in scoring position with 2 outs, as a league average. And of course, you think of Juan Soto as being above league average, but he is a baseball player. There's going to be ups and downs.
Yeah, so I'm looking actually now that you mentioned it, because I'm going on Baseball Reference. Of his 42 plate appearances with runners in scoring position, 14 of those plate appearances, which is actually a good chunk of them, have come with 2 outs, to answer your question. So whatever 14 divided by 42 is the percentage of situations with runners in scoring position that he's coming up with 2 outs.
And that's
And he's
33%.
actually doing
1/3 of the time.
that's a good that's a high value. That's a high value. So, and he's actually not, he hasn't fared that poorly just taking a look at the batting average, he's hitting 231
Nah.
with 2 outs, runners in scoring position. Conversely, with runners in scoring position in general, he's hitting 147. I mean, the
Mhm.
OPS and a slug is not what you would want for either of those categories. But again, I am going to agree with you. If it doesn't change, if those runners in scoring position metrics don't change and they don't go up by, let's say, mid-June, early July, then I'm like, all right, we can have an actual conversation about it. But I I gotta think, especially with the way that the rest of these guys are kind of coming through at this point, that we can live with it for the time being. That's just my personal opinion on that matter. So I will make a note of that though, and we'll go back to the baseball reference page when another month comes around and we'll talk about it. But how about this one right here from Elvin?
I did want to,
Beatty
before
after
we get into
no,
Elvin,
go
I
ahead,
just
go
want
ahead,
to
go ahead. No,
bring up
go
one
ahead.
more thing about Soto. I think part of the struggles too with runners in scoring position and in high leverage situations is, you think of him as the second hitter. For him to produce and drive in runs as the second hitter, the bottom of the order has to get on. The Mets have,
Yeah.
so far through the beginning of the season, basically until Alvarez came back, we haven't really figured out the bottom of the order. Tyrone Taylor got it going in late April. Jose Siri was an automatic out for the first half of the month of April, and then Tyrone Taylor for a couple weeks after them. Acuna and BATY really didn't get it going until I guess a week before BATY got sent down. And then Torrens was, I think, batting up around the 6th hole, or was he? If he was batting in the 7th hole, there was nothing behind him to help move him up further or to have runners on base for Soto. So it's been inconsistent. It's not all Soto. He hasn't done a great job, but also he hasn't had people on as much to drive it.
And also, I know that we're kind of just piling on like what one on top of the other in terms of, what could be happening with Juan Soto. But if pitchers have been pitching around him with nobody on base, what do you think they're doing with runners in scoring position against him, right? It just seems to me from the naked eye when I watch these Mets games and the situational aspect of it is that even with runners in scoring position, unless it's like bases loaded or something, it still seems as if the opposing pitchers would rather face Pete Alonso than
Mhm.
Juan Soto, even given how, good Pete Alonso has been. There's been a handful of times where they could have definitely chosen to pitch to Juan Soto over Pete Alonso, but I found that they were still, even in like a situation that's like second and third, 2 outs, something like that, right? Where they are still actively choosing to see Pete Alonso rather than Juan Soto. And if that doesn't tell you enough about the type of hitter that he is, then I don't know really what will. So, again, these, I guess you can classify them as excuses at the end of the day until he starts producing, but these are just, I guess, the reasons that I think we can come up with at this point to say, hey, listen, we're going to see better numbers with runners in scoring position from Juan
Yeah.
Soto here soon.
Yeah,
There's something that's going to click.
Just an observation we're making with what's still a fairly small sample size. Once we get another 41 games into the season, we'll see where we're at. Because if the numbers, jump up and he starts producing, he drives in, let's say, 30, 40 runs over the next 41 games, we're not going to be having this conversation. We're going to be thinking, wow, Soto is now playing up to Soto levels. I wonder how good Lindor and Alonso is, and how many games above 500 of the Mets, how many games ahead of the Phillies or the Mets. So, you know, things are going to change for Soto. The pitchers are afraid to face him. I think we finally have found what a consistent lineup that should be pretty much getting the lion's share of the starts. And I know we'll get into that with Elvin's comment that I
Yeah,
rudely
yeah,
cut
yeah.
off. Sorry, Elvin.
No, no. Listen, Elvin made a great comment. And I think just before we transition into that comment and talk about, that, I guess, perfect lineup, so to speak, like you just mentioned, great job to the bullpen as well. I want to say in this
Mhm.
game, just to round things out with the series win that we saw this afternoon with Stanek coming in, Reed Garrett, right, coming in as well for a nice out. Edwin Diaz locking the ball game down. All of a sudden, that's two scoreless
Efficient
innings
too.
of work. He's looking good. So, yeah, I mean, listen, really, really, really good job from the Mets bullpen to close this game out outside of this fantastic start from Griffin
Yeah.
Canning. That was awesome to see. And so that takes us to this. The overall numbers, right? From the lineup, from just the offensive guys in general to the bullpen, as we mentioned with Ryan Stanek and Edwin Diaz posting zeros this series in their couple of innings of work apiece. But going back to the offense, this right here, Brett Baty had himself a hell of a series. What a series it was. 4 for
Oh yeah.
8, 6 RBIs, 5 of those RBIs coming in one game. He tried to single-handedly bring the Mets back into the ball game yesterday, twice. Um, 3 home runs collectively, 1 in the first game, 2 in the second game. And all of a sudden, now with the lack of production in general that the Mets have been having at the DH spot offensively, you have a lineup that makes a lot of sense, and it's headlined by 3 really young ball players in this organization, which feels really good to talk about, right? Because now we're transitioning, with all due respect, from the conversations of, as much as I like him, Jesse Winker, who's on the IL, and also Starling Marte, who's approaching the end of his Mets tenure after this season, if he makes it there, to guys that could be here. And I say could because there's still some uncertainty around, especially trade deadline stuff, etc. But for the time being, could be here for a long time. And that's the tandem, the trio here of Brett Baty at third base, Mark Vientos DHing or playing third, because there is,
Yeah.
if Brett Baty replicates this, there is some rhyme or reason to also DH Brett Baty on a
Mm-hmm.
handful of occasions if necessary, and Luis Angel Acuna at second base, who's also just been doing a tremendous job as well. But the huge aspect that I want to talk about here is that the power from Brett Baty, right? If we can see this, because we have never seen, right, this sort
Not
of power
consistently.
in this short sample size from Brett Baty pretty much ever in his career. Um, and so I think that this is his home runs. I think he's got 4 home runs on the season, if I'm not mistaken. And that's already about a quarter of his total home runs that he's hit. I think is in his entire major league career up until this point. You know what I mean? And how many games has he played? It's astronomical. And there's a huge difference between the Brett Baty that we are all seeing right now. I've had endless discussions, right, with Rob, with anybody else that talks Mets on my channel, with Zach, about the second base positional battle that was transpiring there for a little bit. But if you are getting this version of Brett Baty, I have no problem with sticking him back at third base and moving Mark Vientos over to DH, and also just platooning that a little bit. Because I'll take a Brett Baty, Mark Vientos platoon over, you know, trying to work in Starling Marte more than they really should. I think everybody at this point could probably agree with that. And I know
Agreed.
Marte got a hit today. I'm not trying to say that, he still doesn't have it. He still can't contribute to this team in any which way. I get it. Veteran presence, understood. But Marte is not giving you what any 3 of these guys are giving you so far this season. Not
No,
by and large. It feels good, Zach. It
not at
feels
all.
really good.
It does feel really good, and I understand it. Giving him the day off today. I know a lot of people were kind of up in arms about it, and wondering why Baty wasn't in there after the two home run game yesterday, and then the big game on Friday as well. But you want to keep his confidence high. You don't want to have him face a tough lefty. Ease him into that role. He'll have plenty of opportunities to face lefties down in the future. Bullpen arms coming out, other starts. So I think what Baty's doing is he's finally showing what his power can be, because we've only seen it in basically him drilling balls into the ground. We've never seen him be able to put it over the fence at a consistent pace. But, if he can lift the ball, he's got the bat speed and the exit velocity to be a 25, 30 plus home run hitter if he can consistently do this and continue to lift the ball as opposed to grounding out all the time. And it's also about the discipline. I don't know if he struck out. I don't think he did, or if he did, it was like once, because this is someone that can go fishing and he will expand the zone, and, then it'll cause him to ground out more. He'll roll over pitches outside the zone or try to chase something below the zone and just create weak contact. So the talent's there. The defense is there. It's much better than Mark Vientos is. So I expect a lot more starts with Baty at third base and Vientos at DH. if Acuna continues to struggle because he did have a rough series here. He was not amazing in the Diamondback series. I think he kind of petered out towards the end of that series. And if that's the case, you could see Beatty at second base and Vientos at third, maybe McNeil DH, maybe Marte DH. So there's plenty of ways the Mets can play with this lineup. But I think as of right now, at this point in time, the best lineup the Mets can put out is Beatty at third, Acuna at second, and Vientos at DH, and then the rest of the staples just filling in the blanks. So,
Agreed.
yeah, and not only that, it's potentially the future of the Mets, and it's got the most potential otherwise. McNeil, we know what he is. He's no longer the silver slugger hitter. He is someone who, he can put up a competitive at bat, knock in a few runs, have a few slap hits. Obviously have the home run of the series. Maybe he'll run the occasional home run. That's about it. Marte, he's a shell of his former self. He's gets hit by pitches and runs into the occasional single, and that's about it. He doesn't run the bases too well anymore. He doesn't play the field, so he's very limited in what he can do. All three of these guys can, do wreak havoc, whether it's at the plate, in the field, on the base path. Basically, none of what McNeil or Marte can do. So it's time to start transitioning to this, at least to see what we have, because we've never gotten it consistently, at least with Beatty. In terms of Beatty, we've gotten a dose of Vientos last year into this year, Acuna to start this year. Now let's start seeing Beatty out there more consistently.
Yeah. Listen, he's got to prove you right, man. You've been a Beatty supporter through
Always.
and through. When I have not seen division, you have seen division, and that's how we've kind of balanced each other out right there. But I'm willing to, give this a real consideration. And Brett Beatty is playing like he does not want to get traded at the deadline.
No,
right?
And I mean, there's some word out there about someone coming over to the Mets from the other side of Chicago.
Yeah. This is what Oliver is commenting about here. A couple of names. Listen, Rafi Devers, I think anybody would take him on this team. It's a pipe dream. It's not really happening. I'm actually very curious. Like, I know we'll never know until a move actually happens or it doesn't, but I'm curious just how bad things are over there in Boston between Devers and the organization. Is this just being played up by the media, or do you think things are just actually that bad over there? What do you think?
I don't know, because I did see something on Twitter that there was a lot of misinterpretations of what he was saying. The translator that Boston has hired for him is actually mistranslating what he's saying. So
I don't doubt that. Yeah.
I don't know. It's bizarre, especially when there is a language barrier that we don't know exactly what he means. And there is no one-for-one replacement on words spoken in other languages to English. So we don't know if there actually is a divide, and there is some sort of feud going on behind closed doors. But then that being said, I know Oliver, you're talking about trading for Devers, or Rob. Rob is a fan of trading for Devers. I'm not, because to me, he is a great hitter. Trust me, I believe that he's a great hitter. But what does he do for us? I mean, we'd have to trade for him to be a DH. I mean, he's not going to be a fielder for us at that point. He's about as good as Vientos is at third base. If Beatty continues to play like this at the plate, he's going to be our fielder, because Beatty has a great glove. He's got some good range. He's got a great arm. And Devers, at least in my eyes, doesn't really offer much past the ceiling of what we've seen of Brett Beatty and Mark Vientos. He might honestly have the lowest ceilings of them. But the only thing is we've seen him do it consistently year in and year out for the past, 4 or 5 seasons now at the major league level, which we haven't seen from Mark Vientos and Brett Beatty.
Well, and it would take one of those guys
It would
from the
take a lot
to go over at plus. You know what I mean? But it would start with probably one of those guys in Beatty or Vientos, and then
100%.
some.
And Stearns
but
doesn't
also it's
really want
not.
to give that up. He doesn't. He's shown he doesn't want to give up prospects unless you're getting back someone that is under control and fits his philosophy, which starts with defense. Obviously he wants guys under control on the right side of 30 and play good defense. Which
How old is Devers, actually? I'm curious about that. Devers.
I'll look that up real quick.
28. He's 28.
28. So he's
28, 29 in October. But also with the Mets and David Stearns, is they want to, if they're going to do a trade like that, they want to also, I would assume, have the ability to negotiate a contract that they want. You know what I mean? And not that he already is coming over with. And so we know that Devers has the huge contract. I actually don't even know what the valuation of that is. Let me just look that up, the Devers contract. But no, your point about that and some things potentially getting lost in translation is definitely very valid. And I wouldn't be shocked if there was a little bit of that going on with the media and just them kind of just taking things out of context. And we see it all the time. I mean, he's getting paid $27 million a year for the next, this year and next year. It'll go up to 28.5 until
contract,
2033. He's getting paid and through his age 36 season. It's not a terrible contract if you
it's
actually
actually
think
a pretty
about it.
good contract.
It's a pretty
Price
good
wise.
contract. I just don't think I don't think that's a Mets move. I don't think it's a David Stearns move.
The
But
other
on the
name
other hand, that could definitely be. And we've been talking about this name, Luis Robert Jr., for at
two,
least
3
I
years.
have for quite some time. It always seemed like there was a potential fit, between the Mets and a name like Luis Robert. And I like everything that he has to offer as a ball player. There are a lot of injury concerns. There's availability concerns. And I think that's what has been his biggest hiccup, in his career thus far. He's not really having a good 2025 season at all, actually. He's batting 186. OPS is just around 619. It's not good, right? You take a look at what he did last year also collectively across how many games did he play? I'm looking at it right now, 100 games.
Yeah.
We're talking about a guy that has not played over
A full season ever.
130 baseball games in a season outside of the 2023 All-Star season for him at 145. A lot of availability concerns. But with those availability concerns come a potential to add another 20 plus, maybe 25 plus home run bat into the lineup, which at this point, the Mets have a lot of Lindor, Soto, Nimmo, Alonso. You can
Vientos.
say Vientos, Alvarez could work his way up there at some point, although I don't think it's probably likely this season. But if he gets the power aspect side of things of his game back, there's a lot to like about that kind of move. And, he's a guy where I'm guessing you can just say that he'd just be a younger Starling Marte in that kind of role as like kind of a platoon player, because I don't think you're going to insert him as an everyday type of player. But I like the name Luis Robert Jr. I've liked him for the past couple of seasons, especially in the offseason when I've been talking about him on some of my videos. I'm all for that. And I don't think that it would take a lot to convince, one, the White Sox to do it, and two, to just the
Acquire
package.
him.
You
We'd
know
be
what I mean?
trading for him at a low. I mean, and
Correct.
to get someone that has 5-tool potential, you see it with the defense. He's got the speed out there in center field. He's got the speed to steal 30 plus bases, and he's got the pop. His bat speed is in the top 96, in the top 4% of all major leaguers. So this is someone who can, he potential for 30 plus home runs. I think you've seen it the one time in the 2023 season. He had 38 home runs. So this is someone who could be a true force. It's just a matter of consistency issues, whether that's staying on the field consistently or just consistently producing at the plate, which we haven't seen outside of the one season. So it would be a risky trade, but I think it's something that the risks outweigh, or the benefits outweigh the risks rather. Because it's not going to cost a ton. They've already stated that's going to cost Blake Tidwell. So this has to be something that has, at least progressed into throwing names back and forth, not just, is he available? What are you willing to give up? No, there's names being tossed around in a Blake Tidwell, who he got to start up here. He's someone that has some good stuff and is someone that probably doesn't fit on this team with how many pitchers they have to fill that starting rotation. Guys ahead of him in the minors, guys below him in the minors that are absolutely dealing. And just he's kind of in a limbo right now. He's probably won't be a starter here. Obviously, he's going to want to push to be a starter. And Chicago's a place where they're rebuilding. They don't have much talent on the team, so acquiring as much talent as possible, whether that's top end or, just kind of middle of the road, is probably best, especially with Luis Robert, who does have some control left, but not much. Not much where they're not going to turn it around in 2 years. So it would benefit them to trade him before it's too late. and it would benefit the Mets to maybe take a chance on someone that could become a center fielder for the next 10 years, maybe.
Yeah, he's 27. He's in his age 27 season.
Maybe not 10
He's
years.
got
Right?
control for 2 years
Yeah.
after this year. So through the 2028 season, after 2028, he will be an unrestricted free agent. Um, and again, the arbitration in which you'll be paying him, or whatever, it's a club option, I think, for both the next 2 years as well.
Mm-hmm.
So the valuation, I should say, is right around 20 million, according to Spotrac, which,
Yeah.
again, if you want to draw the parallels to Starling Marte, is right around what Starling Marte is getting paid. I think he's getting paid a little bit over 21 actually in his current contract. So a lot of similarities, but clearly you get a player that's 9 years younger at this point than Starling Marte and has that controllability left. So I think it would be a good move, a
Yeah.
low risk, high reward. And if you're telling me that it's going to take Blade Tidwell, I'm saying let's do it, for the exact same reasons that you just mentioned in terms of the Mets pitching depth with prospects coming up. I think they could afford to spare a name like Blade Tidwell, as much as I like Blade Tidwell. But
Yeah. But
yeah,
he's probably the fourth, maybe fifth best starter in the minors right now, and he got the first chance at pitching here in the big leagues. Didn't go how he wanted. There were some positives, obviously some negatives too. But yeah, it would take him. It would probably take. I'd assume the Mets would probably want to send back a Marte or McNeil back that way to get that contract off the books to get that 40-man roster spot opened up, and then probably one other mid to lower end top 30 prospect would probably wrap it up. It's just a matter of if Stearns really wants to take that risk, or he's just kind of throwing out some feelers right now.
yeah. I mean,
So
it's only May 11th as well. I mean, we're talking about a couple months away from the actual trade deadline. So I don't know. I don't think that's a move that'll happen in the month of
no,
May. I think that they're just kind of gearing up towards a potential move happening.
you never know
If the
though.
White Sox are willing to budge. I mean, you never know though, with the way that the Mets outfield depth
Luis
looks like
Torres.
right now. Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting. Oh, just know if you're a Mets fan, we're in good hands because David Stearns is constantly working the phone. Just know that. Right.
That he
So,
is.
um, right here, just to wrap things up between the Mets and Cubs, Mets offense really just headlined by Lindor going 6 of 13, 3 runs scored. That's exactly what you want to see out of your leadoff hitter, getting on base and letting the guys behind him do the work. Although Soto didn't have a great series, 2 for 13 with a couple RBIs again in that first game. Alonso, kind of a lackluster series as well. I think he had like 5+ strikeouts in comparison
Yeah.
to Brett Beatty, like you mentioned, not really striking out, only the 1 strikeout in that first
Mhm.
game. Alonso goes 3 for 13, but Lindor, Vientos going 4 for 9 with a couple RBIs and a home run, obviously in game 3, and Brett Beatty. I mean, those names carried this Mets lineup to a series win. But on the other side of things, outside of the Tyler McGill middle game where he just did not look good. For I believe in 2/3 innings pitched. Again, I was running errands. Coincidentally, during that game, I didn't get to see. I would have went nuts, I think, if I saw what Tyler McGill was doing on that mound in that
I was
game.
at
So
the game.
it was better. Oh, you were at the game, so it was
Yeah,
better that I
yeah.
didn't. I didn't have it up on my phone, but I was following and keeping track on the ESPN app. But it was really good to see the bullpen getting some work in this series, particularly Edwin Diaz and Ryan Stanek, as you can see on the right-hand side of your screen, both posting scoreless 2 innings of work each. Ryan Stanek had the strikeout stuff going in this series, but Edwin
Mhm.
Diaz, man, a guy that at one point didn't pitch for a whole, 8, 9 days, and now he
Yeah,
gets 2
8 days,
innings
I
of
think.
work, locks things down. It's great. What are you feeling like? Because I know that there was a lot of Mets fans that are pressing the panic button when Minter went down, when Young went down, when Buto was kind of struggling, when Ryan Stanek was struggling himself, especially in that national series. What's the vibe like that you can assess with this team right now in the bullpen?
I think the bullpen's great. I think the one weak spot is the Daniel Nunez. He has not looked good in his 2 appearances so far, but outside of that, Kranick is outside of the hiccup on last night. Letting up the 2 runs, which ended up winning, being the deciding runs in the game yesterday. The bullpen's been solid. It's been really, really solid. Stanek has bounced back after his 4 or 5 day stretcher of having some late inning home runs given up and late inning runs to lose some games. Diaz, since his rough start to the season, 2 3 weeks has really settled in. And Reed Garrett continues to look good, and just the bullpen as a whole looks very good. I think I would love to add another high leverage arm or another stabilizer there if Nunez does not kind of pull it together. But I think we're in a good place right now. I think the one thing is they need that lefty in there, and they do not have it right now. Where are we gonna is that something we're gonna find internally? Is it something we're gonna go for externally? Maybe in a package trade, to get someone. I don't know, but I think that's something that's got to be at the top of the list for David Stearns to figure out, because Genesis Cabrera has not looked too good so far, and there's been no one else that you feel comfortable with coming in to take care of a few lefties in a row. Like today, I would have loved to have AJ Minter or even Danny Young come in to face PCA, Kyle Tucker, and then Seiya Suzuki. Something like that. We don't have that right now. Obviously, Stanek and Diaz are able to get the job done, but someone in the middle innings to be able to take care of those guys.
Good job by the Mets bullpen this series, but definitely David Stearns, top of the wish list to make this team and put this team over the top, in the second half of the season going into the playoffs when we eventually get to that point, is definitely bullpen help. Definitely bullpen help. Of course, you're going to have Brooks Raley coming back at some point, but, you know, internal, external, what do you do? The Mets need something at this point, particularly from the left-handed side of the mound, and they just simply don't have that at their disposal right now. And I think given that, Mendoza's done a great job as of recent, outside of that one Diamondback series at home where, he's back to managing in a fashion of being a really great manager and what we saw all 2024 long. So great job to Mendy as well, kind of steering that ship a little bit, even though he doesn't have quite the plethora of assets that he did in the beginning of the season when this team was fully healthy in the bullpen, outside of Daniel Nunez. And I think Daniel Nunez will also, figure it out. He's really talented. We saw really good things from him last season.
Mm-hmm.
The fastball by itself is electric, 98, 99 miles per hour. I think the slider has not looked good objectively. And
Yeah.
last year, his slider was a really good supplemental pitch. It almost reminds me of Edwin Diaz, right? With the way that he works out there on the mound, given the fastball slider combo, the slider just hasn't been sharp and it really hasn't been competitive. Same thing with Edwin Diaz. Like when he struggles, you can tell because even if he's not throwing it for a strike, when the slider is on, it's competitive enough to entice the hitters to swing at
Mm-hmm.
pretty much garbage with light break. And that's the same thing for Daniel Nunez, but it hasn't been the case. The location hasn't been there and the results haven't been there because it just doesn't look sharp right now. And I think that
Yeah.
he's still trying to get a feel for it. And I think that his fastball is also just lacking behind because he can't get that slider over and work in advantageous counts. For the most part, Daniel Nunez is working from behind, and it's come back to bite him in the first couple outings as well. Although it was a huge strikeout that he got
It
in
was.
that first game as well. I think against Dansby Swanson and a baseball that Francisco Alvarez should have definitely caught behind home plate. You cannot allow, I think it was Dansby, another opportunity
Yeah.
at the plate and he dropped the fly ball, and Daniel Nunez picked up his catcher, and then also just got pulled from the game right then and there because Mendoza was sweating bullets in that dugout. But yeah, really good job by Edwin Diaz and Ryan Stanek in this series, and hopefully they can continue that as well. We got to talk about the Mets rotation, though.
Oh
We
yeah.
got to talk about the Mets rotation because the Cubs offense going into this series, we were mentioning how great they were to begin this season, how dynamic, how much firepower, right? Say Suzuki, Kyle Tucker, Dansby Swanson, Carson Kelly, who is having a really good season so far as well. I mean, top to bottom, that's a lineup that can put up a lot of runs in a hurry. PCA, I mean, the list goes on and on and on. The Mets rotation, again, outside of Tyler McGill, Clay Holmes looked fantastic. Fantastic. And honestly, I owe Clay Holmes also an apology because I was still a little bit weary, before the last couple of outings of Clay Holmes because it just seemed like to me he's getting the job done numbers wise, but still working with a lot of traffic on the bases more so than I would like, right? And he has like this start against the Cubs was exactly what I needed to see out of Clay Holmes. Exactly what I needed to see out of Clay Holmes, right? And so he gets the benefit of the doubt. And Griffin Canning is just, as we just talked about with Griffin Canning, just continuing his dominance. These are the Mets rotation ranks of, in the entirety of the MLB as of this stream right now while we are live on May 11th at 9:16 p.m. They are first still by a pretty good margin. I think the Royals or someone second with a 2.9
I'll
something
look that up
ERA.
real quick.
I think it could be the Royals, but please fact check me there. 2.67 is first for the New York Mets. They come in. Did you get that for the ERA?
Which is that? Oh no, I don't have it yet. Sorry.
Okay. Opponent batting average. The Mets rotation ranks ninth, with opponents hitting 236 in the batting average category off of them. They are seventh in total strikeouts as a collective rotation with 215. They are 24th in hits allowed by opposing offenses at 184. And this is the only, and they're also dead last, which is a good thing in this context in terms of home runs given up with only 13 from the Mets starters. But this is the one thing that I think objectively watching these pitchers, especially when you just saw a performance against the Diamondbacks with Kodai Senga, with 5 walks
Mm-hmm.
compared to only 4 strikeouts, you want to see the walks go down because they
Yeah.
do rank at this point 4th most in walks surrendered amongst MLB rotations. So that's the one thing that I'm like, okay, we need a little bit more command. We need a little bit more location consistency, and the walks need to go down in order for us to have a little bit more efficient starts, which they're starting to have with the 6+ innings of work that, Canning is going through, Kodai Senga, Clay Holmes, etc. But I think really just the walks, what's highlighted in red, is the only, I guess, nitpicking that I can do regarding this rotation because they've been so good, Zach. They've been so damn good.
They have been.
And I can't say that's been unexpected because I did expect solid production from
Yeah.
them, but I didn't expect this. I don't think many people expected this.
No, no one could have expected this, and you were right. It is Kansas City that is second in starting pitching ERA. But yeah, I mean, we all know we've all seen Tyler McGill over the years. He's been someone that we've just been waiting for him to turn that corner, and we hopefully he finally has this year. I mean, he's had this last, I think the last 2 starts have been a little bit shaky for him. Obviously, this last the one against the Cubs last night, and the one before that was that in Arizona, or was it it was against the Cardinals, where he kind of had some bad luck in that doubleheader. Some soft hits, some fielding mistakes, and then the true bright spots. I mean, the two just surprises: Clay Holmes and Griffin Canning, who we spoke about Griffin Canning earlier, and then Clay Holmes has just been phenomenal. Someone that has transitioned super smoothly from reliever to starting pitcher, and as of late has become much more efficient and has been able to get deeper into games. If this is someone that can limit the walks, which he did on Friday night, and continue to be able to, just allow less traffic on the base paths and pitch more comfortably, this is someone that we can see get even further into games, start seeing them get into the 7th inning, because I think over the last 2 or 3, he's at least made it into the 6th inning, and I think maybe finished them. I'll look that up real quick. But we kind of all figured that Senga would be as good as he has. It's just a matter if he could stay healthy. And then David Peterson can he replicate last year? So far he has. I think he's actually looked probably the worst of our starting pitchers so far, in my personal
Yes.
opinion.
Mm-hmm.
And but I don't think we ever suspected David Peterson to be a top 3 type arm. He was someone that could be a very good back end of the rotation guy, but he's pitching like a top 3 arm, and hopefully he can continue to do that. This is a rotation that's not built of aces. It's built of guys that are great and pitching to their pretty much their absolute ceilings. I mean, maybe aside from Clay Holmes, who I think can get better, and Tyler McGill, who I think really can be that true ace. He's got the makeup of it. Is an absolute stuff monster, and he's got the size. He's a giant out there. So I think as the season develops, we'll see what happens as Mania Montas go back, but I think as of right now, you can't imagine taking any of these guys out of the rotation for anyone, basically.
You've got, I was just going to say when you were talking there, you've got probably a lot more confidence in Tyler McGill than I do. I'm not going to lie to you.
I'd
But
love
you know
Tyler
what?
McGill.
But you're right, though. He is just like a stuffed monster. I mean, there's nothing really else to say about
This
Tyler
pup is
McGill. It's just like
wicked.
the end results just haven't like been consistent in his career thus far. But you can just tell he has all the tools. I'm just not really sure what's not clicking with him right now. But again, you take a look at just the overall stuff of this rotation. I think Tyler McGill could definitely rank up there towards the top. Now, I'm not as in depth at some of the metrics from the pitching side of things as I am the hitting side of things, but yeah, I think if Tyler McGill is able to find just this consistency that we've been looking out, from him, I should say, ever since we started watching Tyler McGill in this organization, then they'll just be that much better. And we're not talking about that's the scary thing about it too, is that we're not even talking about, right, Montas and Mania coming back. But at this point, given the uncertainty of Frankie Montas, like, do we really expect him to be inserted directly into this rotation? Like,
I
I don't
see
know.
him. I see him coming in as a six man. Like once he's healthy, we fully transition to a traditional six man rotation right there instead of the spot starters. Because I think I saw something the
Correct.
other day. I think we don't have to go to a six man rotation until I think it's the first week of June. Let me look that up real quick. But I think based off of off days, we do not have to transition to that full six man rotation until then. We don't have to worry about calling someone up to spot start or relying on a bullpen game. So I think that kind of coincides with when Montas potentially could be back, which would be to Senga's benefit, who we have not seen pitch on regular rest yet this season. So
Nope.
It'll be interesting. I wonder what the other guys think of it so far, too. I know, was it DeGrom or was it Scherzer when I think it was Scherzer when we first got Senga, did not want to go to a six-man rotation. I'm pretty sure he wanted to stay on regular rest and have him figure it out. So I guess some guys operate in different manners. They want to be on their regular rest, and everyone else can figure it out around them. I think the only guys that I might think that is Tyler McGill and David Peterson, because Clay Holmes was a reliever, so he's probably got no input one way or the other.
Yeah.
And Griffin Canning is probably just happy to be pitching this well. So it's just I think it's something that will happen. I mean, it's kind of been alluded to for so long.
Oh, it's
And
happening. I mean, it's
yeah,
happening.
and then we worry about. I mean, then I know people want to think about Paul Blackburn. That's nothing for me at this point. Paul Blackburn's going to rot in AAA until he requests to be let go by the Mets, because I wouldn't even want him in the bullpen. But Mania, when Mania gets back, I think by then we'll see probably someone take a step back, maybe someone get injured. Knock on wood. Hopefully that doesn't happen. But these things kind of figure themselves out throughout the season, and if they don't, that's just a better problem to have, because if we're
Yeah.
talking about mid June, maybe some to beginning of July, Mania's coming back, and who the hell are we going to take out of this rotation because they've been so good? That is the best problem in the world to have,
Yeah.
because that means the
So
Mets are still winning and the pitchers are pitching well.
I'm curious what the overlap is going to be between when Montas comes back and Mania comes back, because I know that Frankie Montas, per the latest news that I'm looking at right here, is set
Live
to hit
BP.
or is set to face live hitters next week, right? And if that's happening, then a rehab assignment is somewhere on the horizon for him.
Figure
And I
what,
think
3 4
Sean
starts.
Mania is up to throwing at 120 feet. So
Yeah,
again, far, behind Montas, but what's the overlap there? Because you can see what Montas has in the rotation without needing those spot starters, like you said, calling up, the 27th guy, so to speak, and seeing, how Montas is going to react to being inserted into the rotation before you need to make a decision on anybody else when Mania eventually gets back. Because at full strength, when Mania gets back, who do you send down? Or not send down, but who do you send to the pen? And then who do you send down? You know what I mean? So
probably
that's
David
that.
Peterson.
Well, at this point, yeah, David Peterson.
It worked in the playoffs. We need a lefty. and we've seen the Tyler McGill experiment in the bullpen not work,
Like,
even though his stuff definitely would play for the bullpen. It's kind of weird, but
it is. It's a little bit inverse too. It's actually kind of crazy. I agree. And a lot of people say, "Hey, let's put Tyler McGill back into the bullpen. Let's put Tyler McGill back into the bullpen." That's something that is an option, but it just hasn't worked out. When he's been in the bullpen, he does not look comfortable in that role. But David Peterson looked very comfortable in that role, in any given role in the bullpen that we've seen in that short sample size. So I don't know if I'd be too confident in saying that that's probably that could be the move. But if you had to just like ask me, there is a lot of merit to what you just said about that inverse relationship of who succeeds in the bullpen between Peterson and McGill and who doesn't, and how that could benefit the Mets,
yeah,
especially needing a lefty. So
yeah.
100%.
And like I said with
Um,
Tyler McGill, I see him as the one person on this staff that can truly become like the ace. Like
sure.
the stuff just plays. It's wild. He goes out there, and when he's on, I mean, there's not a better pitcher in this rotation than Tyler McGill. It's just he has not been able to consistently do that. You've seen
Right.
it in spurts, a couple starts here and there, but it's just a matter of doing it on a week to week basis, doing it on a month to month basis, and then having it hold up over a whole season. He's obviously had a few injury problems over his career so far. This is probably the best he's looked in, I guess, how many starts are we in? 8 starts on the season? 9 starts? This is
Yeah.
the best he's looked over this type of sample size, and this is probably the healthiest he's been over that sample size. So, knock on wood, it stays that way. He bounces back in his next start, which will be against the Yankees, and hopefully we get Tyler McGill of the first, 6, 7 starts of the season as opposed to the last 2.
Absolutely. And I mean, listen, with these rankings that you see on your screen, I mean, I'm taking that
Subject
all
to
day
change.
long.
Yeah.
With how some fans are talking about this rotation going into this season, I'm taking what these numbers say all day long. So listen, we're about an hour and 7 minutes into the stream. Please do smash those thumbs up buttons if you have forgotten to do so. If you've been listening and haven't done so already, spam the W's if you'd like in the chat, right? I know this is not a true post game per se, but we did see a Mets W, so the W's are still valid. And make sure to subscribe if you enjoy the conversations, right? We try to give you all a different perspective, our objective perspective, that is, about this team. Make sure to subscribe if you're new to the channel. And please don't be shy to drop those comments in the live chat as well. We definitely appreciate it. Okay, last order of business before we sign off on this stream tonight is talking about the look ahead over the next 3 games. And that is welcoming a Pittsburgh Pirates team that just took a series from the Atlanta Braves as of today, on thanks to a walk-off, I think it was actually,
Yes.
and going up against a team that probably pretty hungry. You know what I mean? They listen, they're not a good team objectively. I mean, they started off 12-26, and they fired their manager Derek Shelton. Paul Skeens, who is the face of that franchise at the current moment, outed basically the ex-manager and said somebody had to be held accountable. Did you see that quote, by the way? That's insane. I mean, good for Paul Skeens, to be honest with
I
you. I
had no
mean,
idea he did that, to be honest.
dude, he
I did
is,
not see that. I gotta
a,
look that up.
a reporter asked him, he was like, I forgot who the reporter, again, I don't really pay attention to the reporters' names. They do a very good job, very important things, but I'm more worried about what's actually being said from the player's
Yeah.
perspective. And they asked him, what do you think of the firing of Shelton? And just stone cold, he's like, yeah, I mean, doesn't really surprise me. We started off 12-26. Somebody has to be held accountable, and left
Not
it at
only
that.
not only that, I mean, Sheldon's been there for a few years now, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yes. I don't know exactly how long, but it's been definitely more than just, I think, last season. I think.
Yeah, but this is someone. I mean, obviously it's not all on him, but he has not been able. They have not been able to develop any of the players that were supposed to be these superstar type players. Cabrian Hayes, where the hell is he? I haven't heard his name. O'Neal Cruz has not been good. I mean, obviously Paul Skeens. Paul Skeens came out of college a freak of nature. We knew he was going to be this absolute force. And then Brian Reynolds, what happened to him? I mean, he was supposed to be, the next top 10 outfielder in baseball, and he has really kind of petered out. who's the closer that got sent down and then called back up?
Bednar.
What happened to him? I was shouting
Yeah.
from the rooftops for the Mets to go trade for him back in
Yeah.
2022, and his career's kind of stalled out since then. So this is a team that has so much potential and so many talented players, at least, in terms of where they were ranked as prospects and what they showed down in the minor leagues and showed in some limited fashion here at the major league level, but have not been able to fully put it together. And it's also a team that they have not built around. I mean, they keep trying to just make it work with what they have and haven't, really signed anyone. And that's such a great fan base. So, that's not all on the coach. That's above that. But for him to not be able to, push these players past what we've seen and have them grow anymore, it really speaks volumes. And good on him to call that out like so. And yeah, maybe this is a team that's going to be hungry, but the only person I'm worried about in that whole Pirates team, all 26 players, is Paul Skeens. I mean, that's the only one I'm worried about. Tomorrow's going to be a battle. I mean, hopefully Peterson's up to the test, and it's just about him getting us through 6 innings, and the Mets just trying to work counts and get Skeens out of there as fast as possible and get into that bullpen.
Well, like you said, and this is a huge opportunity for David Peterson, right? Like I like to say, take game 1 of the series, and this is the best example of going up against a phenom in Paul Skeens and trying to just scratch out a win.
Best
But
pitcher in
he
baseball.
hasn't been. I will say he hasn't been unhittable so far this season, right? He's got a 2.77 ERA. He gave up actually
0.9
3
whip.
bombs to this same Chicago Cubs team that we
Yeah.
just played. I think 2 outings ago, because I think the last outing he faced the Cardinals. So we all know what he possesses, right? The type of electricity he has in that arm, um, the vast arsenal that he possesses as
Yeah.
well. But I think that, with the Mets lineup looking competent, right? Looking a little bit more consistent now, I like their chances up against anybody in this league, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
includes Paul Skeens. And I think that David Peterson, as Skeens' counterpart here in this game, right, the opposition, has a really fun chance at this point to go into a game where it's going to be all about Paul Skeens, right? Paul
Mhm.
Skeens this, Paul Skeens that, and be like, hey, look, this is David Peterson, and this is why I'm going to turn out a better outing than Paul Skeens did. And that's just the type of mentality that I would hope David Peterson, who has been objectively probably one of the worst starters for the Mets, and he hasn't been that bad,
Worst.
but it worse, quote unquote, right? Correct. He has just a fun opportunity. I think that you have to embrace that challenge if you're David Peterson, because this could be the start of him finding his footing as well this season. It could be a fun game. And then, the rest of the series, Senga versus Keller, Holmes versus Falter. I mean, like, this is a series. I'm sorry to say it. I would be happy with a series win, but this is a sweepable series,
Mhm.
especially if you take that first game. This is a sweepable series. But this Pirates team, as all teams that are sub 500, just like the Marlins, right? Whoever else you want to name that is sub 500, that always seems to give their
The
best foot
Nationals.
forward when they play the Nationals against the New York
Mhm.
Mets. This is a team that you really should not be taking lightly at the end of the day. And really no team in this league should be
No,
taken
not at all.
lightly, but I think the
Except the Rockies.
Pirates over especially ever since, what was it, like 2019 or 2020, whatever season it was, where I think Garrett Stallings had that grand slam walk off of Edwin Diaz in the game that the Mets led. I forgot what year that was. It's
Yeah,
such
I
a
think that was
throwback. It might have
19.
been even 2021, to be honest. I don't know what it was. Anyways, who cares? You
Yeah.
know, also going back to the days of, Kurt Suzuki hitting a walk-off against Edwin Diaz. I was at that game, by the way, where the Mets blew
Oh,
a 6-run lead in the 9th inning. I was at that game.
nice.
Um,
That was against
these
the
teams
Nationals?
have, what was that?
That was against the Nationals, that Kurt
The
Suzuki woke up?
Nationals,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
at Nats Park, man. Oh my goodness. That was when we still had Mr. Seawald. Mr. Paul
Oh, God.
Sewald
Yeah.
was entrusted in a 6-run lead with a 6-run lead, could not find it, and Edwin Diaz had to come in for mop-up duty, and he also failed. So what a throwback that was. That's not like what I want to remember on this stream right
No,
now. We're
no,
talking.
no.
But anyways, my point remains is that this team, at this point now, has something to prove after the firing of their manager, their former manager, and they just seem like they could be a team that's hungry, and that firing could be or it could not be a turning point of their season for better or for worse. So, again, with the matchups outside of game one, you got the advantage. I mean, Keller is a good pitcher.
Rough year.
He's got like what a 4 something ERA,
Yeah,
same thing with
4.5,
Falter.
1.43 whip, so he hasn't been too good. And then Falter is
Yeah.
about the same. And to be honest, I haven't heard much of Falter. I think he's kind of just someone that's there, in my opinion. I mean, this is a team that they really built. They're building their team around um, Paul Skeens and Mitch Keller, and those are supposed to be the guys that are headlining that rotation. And Skeens is obviously he's lived up to it so far. He's been phenomenal. I think like you said, a rough start against the Cubs, and kind of spiked his numbers a bit, but he's still a beast. And it's just a matter of just trying to work his count up, maybe tack on a few runs, sneak one or two past him, and then get into that bullpen where we can do some real damage. And then the rest of it's just make sure that have our starters keep it close, and the offense just got to get going from the jump, from first pitch.
Yeah.
Keller and Falter both very hittable, both pitchers that we shouldn't be afraid of. Even though I think Mitch Keller usually pitches pretty well against the Mets, if I remember correctly. So we'll see what happens. I like the Mets' chances here to definitely take two, if not sweep the Pirates, and that would be great to carry a ton of momentum going into what will be a battle in the Bronx.
Yes, that's going to be a really fun
We'll
series,
talk
and
about that later in the week.
yeah, we'll preview that hopefully on Thursday when we do another off day stream this week. But another name that we don't see here against the Mets, and I don't think that he's actually on the active roster because he's hurt, but he's going to be back soon for the Pirates, is Jared Jones, who actually threw a gem against the Mets. I think it was early
That's what I was
last
thinking of.
season. Jared Jones is a stud too. Wasn't
Yeah,
he
I forgot
teammates with
about him.
Skeens at LSU or no? I think
Was
he
he?
was.
He might have been. That's who I was thinking of. Not Mitch Keller, Jared
Yeah.
Jones.
Well, Mitch Keller's not terrible, but it's like I
No,
think
he's
that
a
they're
good.
definitely building that rotation around Jared Jones and Paul
Yes, yeah.
Skeens, and rightfully so. I mean, Jared Jones is a stud as well. But the point is, like Zach just said, a sweep would be nice. Am I expecting it? I guess not. I'll revise that. I am expecting a sweep. I'm expecting a sweep, but I will settle for a series win because this has got to be a series win. Riding momentum high into the Yankees series. You're absolutely correct. Absolutely. And really the offense, just keep working the opposite field, man. Like I think Oliver set up in the chat. Brett Beatty did a great job with the Oppo home run. Alvarez, I think, is another hit the opposite way.
Who did that?
Two, right? So like again, it's not rocket science. You pull the baseball when they pitch you in, like you said with Vientos, but when you have a ball over the heart of the plate slash on the outer third of the plate, don't feel like you need to pull the baseball all the time because generally speaking, it's not going to be successful. And I think that you're starting to see the more well-rounded approaches from a lot of these guys in BATY, Vientos, Nimmo even, who's also hitting the ball the
Mhm.
opposite way. I think he got a base hit the opposite way today as well.
Yep.
They're
Little
starting to come
dunker.
around while spraying the ball to all fields, and it's nice to see.
Yeah, no, they're just continuing this good approach, and if they can get going, and really kind of bridge that our big guns or our top dogs at the top of the order, be that bridge to get to the bottom of the order, they could have a ton of innings where they're having 6, 7 guys come up to the plate. I mean, you're not going to have a break when if these 3, 4 guys are on. Brett Beatty continues to play like this. Vientos, it finally breaks out of a slump and starts playing like we know he can. Same with Nimmo, and Alvey continues to hit the ball like he has. You're going to talk about pitchers not having a break for 7, 8 players in a row. They're going to have to go through an absolute gauntlet to get to easy outs in Acuna and Tyrone Taylor at the bottom of the order. And Acuna himself isn't necessarily an easy out. Neither is Tyrone Taylor. These are professional ball players, and while they're not monsters at the plate, they can handle the stick. And Acuna, while being a little bit of a slump right now, he's someone that was hitting above 300 for a while. So this is it's going to be a test for opposing pitchers if these guys can continue to hit the ball well and continue to put up competitive at bats.
10 plus stolen bases for Luis Angel Acuna as well, by the way. Do you think he hits 40?
Do I think he hits 40?
I'm
I think he
curious.
can. I really do think he can. My big thing with Acuna has always been, can he get on base enough to steal 40 bases?
Yeah.
He can if he
Mhm.
can get on base. The thing is, he just doesn't walk. He just does not walk. He swings the bat the same way, 0-0, 0-2, 3-2. He swings the bat as hard as he possibly can. He's out there taking big cuts at the ball, and he doesn't have a ton of bat speed. He's not going to be someone that's going to be at the top of an average exit velocity, but he just needs to shorten up and try to continue to find holes wherever he can get them. And he's done that so far, but laying off those pitches out off the plate and, trying to work in positive counts as opposed to negative ones, where I feel like he's always, out there with two strikes against them.
Yeah. Um, Final thought here for me, because I honestly, this has no relation to anything. It's kind of just random, but I was watching a little bit of the beginning of the Sunday night baseball game today between the Guardians and the Phillies, and Mr. Kyle
Sure.
Schwarber, another home run, who's entering a free agent season. We talk about a lackluster DH position. I would love Mr. Schwarbaum to come over to Queens and hit some home runs for us, but we'll talk about that in the offseason when we get there. He's just a really talented bat, and I think that what he does with the power alone is pretty special.
Yeah.
But we'll talk about that. Again, I'm getting way too ahead of myself, but
Yeah.
we're talking about division rivals, and that's a really good contract that the Phillies made out with Schwarber. They
Oh
got
yeah.
really good production. But that's a team that is kind of on the cusp of being a little bit dismantled when you talk about, Castellanos' situation, Schwarber entering free agency, et cetera.
JT
So,
Realmuto getting older.
mhm,
They,
mhm.
Aaron Nola having himself a really big down year so far to start the season. Zach Wheeler not pitching to his Cy Young self. I think his stats are a little bit lower than normal. This is a team that they needed someone like Trey Turner to live up to being, a top three shortstop in the league, and hasn't done that.
Has not done that.
Alec Boehm to grow into a legit third baseman for this team and be that guy that can be in the middle to bottom, I guess the middle third of the order, somewhere between 5, 6, 7, and be a big hitter for them there. And he has not done that. He's after a good first half the last season, he's kind of just fallen apart and regressed to his old ways. So this is a team that might need to do a quick retool, trade off some pieces depending on where they are, at the deadline. Obviously right now I think they're only 2.5 games behind the Mets, and they're winning a ton of ball games, and looks like they're going to be in the thick of things come September, come October. But if this is a team that finds their way towards 500 and maybe 5-10 games behind the Mets, or 10 games behind the Mets at the trade deadline, they might need to think about selling off some pieces to do a quick retool, not a full rebuild, but try to take advantage of Harper before he gets a little bit older and he's not producing like he once did
Yeah, I was a little bit surprised that they didn't try to do some of that quote unquote
in the
retooling
offseason.
in the off season, but I guess
Tastiana
they figured
Schwarber.
that one more year to go for it after a disappointing exit against the Mets in that NLDS series, and we'll see what happens. But they're 2 games behind the Mets. They made up some ground here early in the season in May, and it's
Mm-hmm.
just going to be a battle. I mean, the Braves are going to sneak up. I mean, if you're expecting the Braves not to sneak up, I'm not really sure what planet you've been living on in terms of watching the NL East over the past couple of seasons, but I fully expect them to. I think the Mets are better than both teams, but it's going to be a fight to the end, and that's exactly what I'm expecting. I don't know. I don't know if I see objectively the Mets gaining, anywhere past a 5-game lead up until the deadline. I don't think I see that. And that's even with the Mets playing great baseball, because I just think the Phillies are going to be that good as well. We're talking about their roster and it kind of like ending, not the end is not near for the Phillies, right? But some guys are getting older, some guys are hitting free agency, and it is what it is. And this is really what, like, the Phillies, I feel like had a nice 3 to 4 year window, at least 3 years, right? Going back to last season, season before that, et cetera, where they had a chance to win another title. And I think this is probably maybe the last year slash second to last year where they can really say this is the best opportunity that we have with the current roster that we have. So no shade to them. They're just going to have to figure out and get creative a way to sort of, like you said, Zach, retool the roster. But anyways, it's not a Phillies podcast. It's Mets podcast. It's a true Mets talk podcast. And we appreciate you all tuning in. Let's go Mets. It was a fantastic Series W for the New York Mets, the second Series W in a row, following a really good performance against the Arizona Diamondbacks in Arizona, and now back at
Yes.
home against the Chicago Cubs. Zach, thanks so much also
Thank
for
you for having me
another
on.
hour plus of your time. And Thursday, we're going to try to get a stream with all of us, Zach, myself, Rob. We got to work some things out. Hopefully it happens this week, but if not, in the near future. And you'll see all three of us hopefully on the screen at the same time at some point. So expect an off stream on the channel at the minimum on Thursday. And I don't know if I'll be able to do a post game tomorrow. I really want to. I know I've been kind of absent with the post games. Life happens, stuff happens, just super busy. But I know Tuesday and beyond, I think I should be good to go for post game. So as always, smash the thumbs up buttons, subscribe to the channel, hit the notifications button on the channel to get notified when a new episode or a new stream goes live. And let's go Mets. We'll see you all
Let's
the
go,
next
Mets.
time. And subscribe to Sunny Days Media as well over on
Yes,
YouTube. Don't
please.
miss
Thank you
that.
very much.
Awesome. I appreciate it. See you all later. Let's go Mets. Peace out.
Let's go, Mets.